There are moments in a woman's life that carve themselves so deeply into her memory that even years later, she can recall the temperature of the room, the rhythm of her breath, the way her heartbeat trembled with hope. And perhaps you know this moment all too well, the moment right after intimacy, when everything that felt warm and alive suddenly shifts into an unbearable quiet. It's the strange silence that falls not like peace, but like a question that has no name, a hollow pause where the world seems to hold its breath. You feel him drifting into a distance you cannot follow, and without meaning to, your heart reacts before your mind can catch it. Something inside you whispers, "What just happened? Where did he go? Why does the man who was holding me so closely seconds ago now feel miles away?" This moment is more than uncomfortable. It pierces. It shakes your certainty. It makes even the strongest woman feel suddenly fragile. Because intimacy is not just a physical act for you. It is an opening of the soul, a silent offering, a surrender that carries truth. And yet, right when you believe the connection is blooming into something luminous, something collapses. Not in him, but in you. You begin searching for meaning in the shadows. Was I enough? Did he feel anything real? Is he pulling away already? Did I imagine our closeness? These thoughts don't appear because you're insecure. They appear because intimacy is sacred for you. And when something sacred feels interrupted, the heart trembles. But today, I want to take you into a deeper reality, one that most women never hear, one that could change the way you experience connection for the rest of your life. Because the silence you fear is not a sign of loss, it is not rejection, and it is not a disappearance. It is something far more ancient, far more instinctive, and far more profound than you might imagine. To understand it, you must step beyond the surface of male psychology and into the subtle realm where biology, emotion, and archetypal energy intertwine. You must learn to see what is invisible. Let me guide you there through Laura's story. A woman of 45 who had survived heartbreak and slowly rebuilt a life she trusted again. When she met Diego, she dared to hope. Their conversations felt like soft lanterns lighting a path she thought had gone dark forever. Their laughter was easy, their chemistry undeniable. And when the night finally arrived when their bodies met, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, a quiet awe. A sense that her heart was not just touching another's body, but being welcomed after a long exile. Every touch felt like an affirmation, every kiss like a promise. She let herself believe, just for a moment, that life was giving her back something she had lost. But after the final breath of intensity passed, Diego's face shifted. His eyes drifted to the ceiling. His body went still, and then he turned away into a silence so sharp it almost stung. The warmth vanished. A shadow entered the room, and Laura felt something inside her collapse. The questions rose like a storm she couldn't control. Was this all it meant to him? Did I misread everything? Why did he disconnect just when I needed closeness most? But what Laura didn't know, and what countless women don't know, is that this silence was not about her at all. It was the unfolding of a male cycle older than language, a biological release that shifts the male brain into a brief shutdown, a wave of prolactin that pulls his system inward, a reset that quiets his emotional responses for a short time. Not intentionally, not consciously, not as rejection, but as a natural return to his internal center. And beneath biology lies something even deeper, the energetic contraction of masculine essence. During intimacy, masculine energy expands outward, penetrates, reaches, gives. But as soon as the climax of the moment fades, that same energy instinctively retreats back into itself, like a tide returning to the ocean. It is not abandonment. It is restoration. It is how the masculine regains equilibrium after opening so fully. But here is where most relationships fracture. Not because of his silence, but because of how that silence is interpreted. When a woman panics, questions, or tries to hold on to the moment, the man's subconscious feels the pressure. Not because she is wrong for feeling what she feels, but because his energy in that moment is not ready to meet hers. He is not rejecting her. He simply cannot remain externally open while his internal system is recalibrating. And if she pushes, even gently, the masculine instinct is to withdraw further, to protect the small space he needs to return to himself. But imagine something different for a moment. Imagine a woman who does not meet that silence with fear, but with presence. A woman who understands that the stillness is not a threat, but a passage. A woman who remains soft, grounded, calm, not to please him, but because she trusts her own energy. That woman becomes unforgettable. Because in a world where everyone reacts, she becomes the rare presence that allows space without losing herself inside it. She becomes the one place a man can return to without feeling pulled, pressured, or demanded. She becomes, without a single word, the sanctuary where his heart can breathe. And when a man finds that sanctuary in a woman, something profound awakens in him. Devotion. Not the devotion that comes from fear of loss or the comfort of routine, but the kind that comes from soul recognition. This is where your power lies. Not in trying to stop the silence, but in learning how to inhabit it with grace so magnetic that he naturally finds his way back to you, again and again. There is a moment in every woman's journey where she realizes that the way a man behaves after intimacy says far more about his inner world than it does about her worth. But this understanding isn't born from books or theories. It is born from heartbreak, from silence, from nights where she lies awake, wondering why closeness can feel like distance wrapped in warm skin. And this is exactly where the transformation begins. Because when you step out of the old narrative, the one that tells you his silence means you're not enough, you begin to see the truth with new eyes. This truth becomes clearer through Patricia's story, a woman who built a life everyone envied. For 20 years, she and her husband Hector had what many couples dream of: a home filled with stability, 2 children who had grown into kind adults, and a marriage that looked like harmony from the outside. But a picture-perfect life can often hide the quietest wounds. And for Patricia, the wound opened most painfully after intimacy. During lovemaking, Hector was present, deeply present. His body spoke desire. His hands discovered her the way a man explores something sacred. His breath matched hers. And in those minutes, Patricia felt chosen, seen, held, alive. But once the fire dissolved into stillness, everything changed. Hector turned away. His body cooled. His energy retreated. And Patricia was left staring into the dark, feeling the space between them widen like a silent canyon. That silence didn't just swallow the room. It swallowed her certainty. Night after night, she wondered, why does he disappear right when I need him most? Have I become invisible inside my own marriage? Is my desire a burden? She didn't ask these questions out loud, but they echoed inside her chest until they became a weight she carried everywhere. Eventually, life pushed her toward therapy, not because her marriage was falling apart, but because her spirit was. And in that quiet, safe room, she learned something that lifted the veil from years of confusion. Her therapist told her something rooted in Carl Jung's teachings, that after deep emotional or physical surrender, the masculine psyche instinctively withdraws, to recover its sense of self. Intimacy cracks open the male shadow, the inner parts that fear vulnerability, fear being consumed, fear losing control. And so, after giving so much of himself, the masculine retreats not to abandon the connection, but to anchor himself again. Hector wasn't turning away because he didn't love her. He was turning inward because he wasn't trained or taught to remain open after offering so much. His silence wasn't the problem. Patricia's interpretation of his silence was where the wound lived. Once she understood this, something within her quietly shifted. Instead of filling the silence with panic, she started filling it with presence. Instead of asking questions to soothe her fear, she learned to soothe her own heart. She realized that love doesn't deepen by clinging. It deepens by allowing. So she practiced something revolutionary in its simplicity: stillness. She stopped asking, "Why aren't you holding me?" and began asking herself, "How can I hold myself right now?" She stopped trying to pull Hector back emotionally and gently gave him the space his nature needed. Not out of resignation, out of wisdom. And that wisdom changed everything. As weeks passed, Hector slowly began to shift. The silence that once held distance now felt like a shared breathing space. Without pressure, without expectations, without fear pressing against his chest, Hector found himself turning back toward Patricia, not out of obligation, but out of desire. His gestures softened. His affection grew warmer. He reached for her more often, not because she asked, but because she made space for him to return on his own terms. And the love that formed between them wasn't the fragile kind built on need. It was the grounded kind built on freedom. This transformation wasn't magic. It was alignment. It was the moment a woman understands that she does not lose herself. By giving space, she finds herself. But not every woman learns this in time, and Anna was one of them. Anna, after nearly 3 decades of marriage, thought she knew everything about her husband Leonardo, his habits, his desires, his rhythms. Their intimacy was tender, passionate, filled with touches that carried history. But each time the passion settled, Leonardo withdrew in the same quiet way. And unlike Patricia, Anna didn't know the deeper truth behind that moment. His silence cut her. It made her feel discarded, unseen, forgotten. So she did what many women do when they feel the man they love slipping away. She tried to pull him back, not with anger, but with fear disguised as affection. She held him tighter, anxiously seeking reassurance. She asked questions he wasn't ready to answer. She searched his face for signs that she still mattered to him. With every touch she offered, she silently pleaded, "Show me I haven't lost you." But what she didn't know was that in those fragile minutes after intimacy, her urgency collided with his instinctive withdrawal. And instead of bringing him closer, she pushed him further away. Not because she was wrong, but because she didn't understand the timing of the masculine heart. A man who is retreating to find his center cannot receive a woman who fears losing him. The more she reaches, the more trapped he feels. The more she searches for connection, the more overwhelmed he becomes. It's not rejection. It's self-preservation. The tragedy is that Anna was not trying to suffocate him. She was trying to save the connection. But she didn't yet know what women like Patricia and countless others eventually learn. That some of the most powerful moments of connection are born in silence. Not the silence filled with fear, but the silence filled with trust. Because trust, more than anything else, is what gives love the room to breathe. And only a woman who anchors herself in that trust can transform a man's silence into a bridge, rather than a barrier. There comes a point when the pattern becomes unmistakable, the moment after intimacy, where a man's energy withdraws, not with cruelty, but with instinct. And this is the moment where the fate of many relationships is silently decided. Some women respond with fear, tightening their grip. Others respond with presence, expanding their power. And the difference between the two is the difference between a bond that dissolves and a connection that becomes unforgettable. Anna learned this too late. Her fear of losing Leonardo made her cling to him at the exact time his masculine energy needed space. She didn't know that his withdrawal was not a verdict on her value, but a natural rhythm, one she kept interrupting with her own longing. But what she couldn't see was the delicate thread that connects two lovers after the final breath of passion. That thread isn't strengthened by pulling. It's strengthened by allowing, by trusting, by understanding the sacred rhythm of intimacy. If Anna had known what was unfolding inside Leonardo, she would have acted differently. Because the truth is that immediately after deep intimacy, a man's psyche falls into a temporary inner cave, a place where his masculine essence recenters itself. Carl Jung called it the return of the masculine shadow, the instinct to retreat inward after revealing too much. It's not because he wants distance, it's because openness makes him feel exposed, and exposure, even to the woman he loves, awakens an ancient need to reassemble himself. When a woman panics in this moment, she sends a message that vibrates with fear rather than connection. Her heart beats faster. Her questions come sharper. Her touch becomes a request rather than an offering. And without realizing it, she speaks a language his energy cannot receive. Not because she is wrong, but because the timing is wrong. A masculine heart cannot expand in the same moment it is recalibrating. And when a woman rushes into that fragile space, even with the purest intentions, she unknowingly interrupts a process he needs in order to return to her wholeheartedly. But imagine now a different woman. A woman who meets that same silence with grace. A woman who breathes slowly, allowing her own energy to settle. A woman who does not interpret his retreat as rejection, but as the natural rhythm of his masculine essence. This woman becomes a force he cannot forget. And this is exactly what Daniela discovered. Not by chance, but through awakening. For years, she lived the same painful loop with her husband Hugo. Their intimacy was passionate, alive, full of fire. But the moment the fire softened, Hugo hardened. He turned away, closed his eyes, drifted off into a silence that felt like abandonment. Daniela lay beside him, with tears she never let fall. She loved him deeply, but after every encounter, she felt a loneliness sharper than before. It wasn't the physical act that hurt her. It was the emotional vacuum that followed. She kept asking herself what she was doing wrong. Was she not enough? Was she too much? Was she failing him in ways she couldn't see? But none of those questions brought answers. Only exhaustion. Until one evening, in a workshop on conscious femininity, something in her shifted forever. The instructor said a single sentence that pierced straight through her confusion. A woman loses her power the moment she reacts from fear instead of presence. Those words echoed inside Daniela like a bell. In that moment, she understood she had been treating intimacy as if its meaning depended on Hugo's response. She had been giving, longing, reaching, not from her center, but from her fear of not being chosen. So she made a choice that night. She chose herself. The next time they were together, she felt the familiar wave, the intensity, the closeness, the softness, and then the moment where Hugo began to withdraw. She sensed it instantly. She could have panicked. She could have repeated the old cycle. But instead, she did something revolutionary. Nothing. She didn't reach for him. She didn't fill the silence. She didn't ask if he loved her. She simply closed her eyes, placed her awareness in her lower belly, and let her breath expand gently like a warm tide. She repeated to herself, in the quietest voice inside her soul, "I am enough. I do not chase energy. I allow it to return on its own." In that stillness, something miraculous happened. Not outside her, but within. She felt her energy gathering, condensing, returning home. For the first time in her life, she wasn't waiting to be chosen. She was simply being. And her presence filled the room with a calm, so subtle, so irresistible, that Hugo felt it before he understood it. Minutes passed. Then, without warning, without words, Hugo rolled toward her. He wrapped his arms around her waist and pressed his forehead into her neck. His voice broke when he whispered, "I don't know why, but being close to you right now feels like peace." That moment wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was energetic truth. Daniela hadn't begged, persuaded, or demanded. She had shifted her vibration. And in doing so, she transformed silence into a sanctuary, one his soul recognized without needing explanation. But the most powerful transformation happened with Juliana, a woman who spent years believing her body was enough to create connection. She offered everything, her affection, her passion, her devotion, but still felt that after every intimate moment, her husband Romero drifted away emotionally. He loved her body, yes, but something deeper, something essential, was missing. She couldn't name it, but she felt it every night, like a whisper telling her she was giving everything yet receiving almost nothing in return. Until one night, after years of this quiet ache, she finally understood. The body can touch the body, but only consciousness can touch the soul. What she longed for was not a physical response. It was spiritual recognition. It was the moment she realized that intimacy is not an act. It is an energy. An energy cannot be forced. It can only be emanated. So she stopped trying to earn connection and began creating it from within. And the night she stood in her own internal light, Romero felt something he had never felt before. A presence that did not cling, did not fear, did not shrink. A presence that felt like home. And that is when Juliana became unforgettable. Not because she gave more, but because she became more. There comes a turning point in a woman's life when she finally understands that intimacy is not about the body. It is about the energy she carries into and out of the moment. And for Juliana, this realization arrived not with fireworks, not with dramatic arguments, but in a quiet evening where she finally heard her own soul louder than her fears. For years, she believed that giving more affection, more effort, more vulnerability would bridge the gap she felt after intimacy. She believed that if she softened enough, loved enough, surrendered enough, she would finally reach that hidden part of Romero she kept losing right when she needed it most. But the truth she discovered was far more profound and far more liberating. The moment she stopped trying to reach him was the moment he finally felt her. That night, when she met his gaze without expectation, something subtle but immense shifted inside him. There was no pleading in her eyes, no urgency in her hands, no invisible thread of need pulling at his energy. Instead, she radiated a calm so deep that it felt like gravity. And Romero, who had always retreated after intimacy, as if protecting something fragile inside himself, suddenly found himself wanting to stay. He touched her face as if he were touching her for the first time, not her skin, but her essence. His voice trembled when he whispered words he didn't fully understand. "Being with you right now feels like touching something sacred." And for the first time in their marriage, Juliana didn't rush to interpret it, didn't ask what he meant, didn't cling to the moment. She simply received it, breathing it in like a blessing. Because her transformation wasn't about getting more from him, it was about giving herself back to herself. This is the pivotal shift most women never make. They search for reassurance in a moment when reassurance cannot be given. They try to connect at the exact moment the masculine is retreating inward. They offer more touch, more words, more emotion, not out of abundance, but out of fear. And fear is the one energy that can never create lasting connection. Once a woman understands this truth, she becomes untouchable, not in coldness, but in sovereignty. She becomes the woman who does not fear silence, because she no longer abandons herself inside it. She becomes the woman whose presence fills the room, even when she says nothing. And a man feels it instantly. He recognizes something in her he cannot name, but cannot forget. Because the most magnetic feminine energy in the world is the energy of a woman who is rooted in herself. This is why men return to certain women long after the relationship ends. It is not because of what she did for him, or how she looked, or what she gave. It is because her energy left an imprint. It touched a place inside him that no one else reached, not through intensity, but through depth. Depth is the feminine superpower, and you activate it not by doing more, but by being more present, more grounded, more in tune with your essence. When you understand this, everything changes in the moments after intimacy, because in those sacred seconds when his body relaxes and his spirit retreats, you are not losing him. You are witnessing his return to himself. And the woman who understands this rhythm becomes the woman he feels safe returning to. Think of it like breath. The masculine energy is the exhale, releasing, expanding, giving. The post-intimacy withdrawal is the inhale, returning inward, restoring, reclaiming equilibrium. If you interrupt the inhale, he feels suffocated. If you allow it, he returns to you stronger, more open, more connected. And no woman embodied this wisdom more beautifully than Elena. At 55, Elena was a woman who had lived enough life to know that age does not dull the desire to be seen, held, or cherished. After her divorce, she met Marcos, a man whose passion reignited parts of her she thought had faded forever. Their chemistry was immediate and powerful. But the moment after intimacy became her battlefield. Marcos would turn away, settle into his own silence, and drift off, leaving her staring at the ceiling with a mix of longing and disappointment. For a while, she repeated the old pattern, touching him to check if he was still there, whispering questions he wasn't ready to answer, trying to hold on to a closeness she feared would disappear. But one evening, after yet another moment where she felt herself collapsing internally, she realized something painful. She had been abandoning herself in the exact moment she feared he was abandoning her. So she did something daring. She stopped abandoning herself. That night, when Marcos slipped into his familiar silence, Elena placed a hand over her own heart, not his. She felt her own breath, not his reactions. She caressed her own arm with tenderness, not to comfort herself, but to remind her soul that she belonged to herself first. And the energy in the room shifted instantly. It was subtle, but unmistakable. For the first time, Marcos didn't fall into sleep. He turned, slowly, as if something was pulling him. Not her hands, not her words, but her energy. And he looked at her with a softness that had been absent for months. "What's different about you tonight?" he murmured. Elena didn't answer. She just smiled, a small, knowing, grounded smile. A smile that said, I am here, but I am no longer waiting for you to complete me. And that energy, calm, sovereign, magnetic, drew him to her like a tide. He reached for her, not out of habit or desire, but out of longing. Real longing. Because a man will always return to the woman who holds space without losing herself inside it. To the woman who understands that silence is not a threat, it is a doorway. To the woman whose presence feels like both freedom and home. And this is the truth that shapes the deepest connections. A woman who remains rooted in herself becomes the place a man seeks when he is ready to feel deeply again. There is a moment in every powerful woman's journey where everything shifts. Not because the world around her has changed, but because she finally sees her own reflection clearly. Not the reflection in a mirror, not the reflection a man gives her, but the reflection she meets when she stands in silence after intimacy and realizes she is no longer afraid of herself. This is the moment when a woman stops asking, "Why is he silent?" and starts understanding, "The silence is where my true power begins." Because what happens after intimacy is far more revealing than any touch or kiss. It is the moment when the masks slip, when the body quiets down, when all that remains is energy. His energy retreats. Yours expands. And most women feel the imbalance and panic, believing they must close the gap before it grows. But the deeper truth is this: the gap is where love is either reborn or broken. Not through words, not through touch, through energy. And the woman who understands this, truly understands this, becomes unforgettable. Because a man does not bond through intensity alone. Intensity excites him, passion awakens him, desire ignites him. But it is the energy after intimacy that determines whether he stays, returns, or disappears. Not because he is cold, but because his masculine essence recognizes whether the woman lying beside him is anchored or reaching from fear. And the most magnetic feminine energy is the energy of a woman who does not reach. A woman who knows she is enough without his reassurance. A woman who breathes deeply instead of overthinking. A woman who softens into herself, not into his shadow. A woman whose presence whispers, "I am here, whole, and I trust the rhythm that exists between us." This is the woman whose energy becomes a home, not a cage, not a request, not a demand. A home. Because a man does not stay where he feels pressured. He stays where he feels peaceful. And peace is a feminine frequency. This is the essence behind why Daniela, Juliana, Elena, and countless women before them transformed their relationships without uttering a word. They shifted not what they did, but who they were in those sacred minutes. They stopped offering their fear and began offering their presence. They stopped offering their anxiety and began offering their breath. They stopped offering the panic of "hold me" and began embodying the truth of "I am already held within myself." And in that space, the masculine returns, not fast, not dramatically, but deeply. Because the masculine does not respond to pressure. It responds to gravity. And the feminine heart, when rooted in its center, has a gravitational pull stronger than desire, stronger than beauty, stronger than anything the external world can offer. This is why some women are unforgettable even years later. It is not their looks. It is not what they did in intimacy. It is the calm they radiated afterward. That calm becomes a memory the masculine soul can feel even in their absence. A memory that whispers, "You were safe with her. You were whole with her. You could breathe with her. And this is the woman you are becoming now. Not by force, not by performance, not by bending yourself into a shape designed to earn love, But by rising into the shape you were always meant to hold, the shape of a woman who understands her worth so deeply that she does not collapse inside silence. Because silence is not where love dies. Silence is where love is tested. Silence is where your energy speaks the loudest. And if your energy speaks from fear, he feels it like a weight. If your energy speaks from neediness, he feels it like a net. If your energy speaks from urgency, he feels it like a demand. But if your energy speaks from serenity, he feels it like home. And home is the one place a man always returns to. This is why, now that you understand the rhythm of the masculine heart, you are no longer the woman who panics in the dark or questions her worth between breaths. You are no longer the woman who waits for reassurance to feel safe. You are no longer the woman who loses herself in the very moment she desires connection most. You have become the woman who transforms silence into sanctuary, the woman who lets her breath do the speaking, the woman who lets her presence do the loving, the woman who lets her energy do the calling. And this power, this deep, sacred, feminine sovereignty, cannot be imitated, cannot be faked, cannot be taken away. It can only be embodied. And once it is embodied, you become unforgettable to any man whose soul is capable of connection. Because a man can forget a face, he can forget a body, he can forget words, but he can never forget the woman whose presence touched him beyond the physical, a woman who awakened peace in him in a world that constantly demands his strength. That woman is you now. So I want you to anchor this truth within yourself, not as a phrase you memorize, but as a vibration your whole being carries. I no longer fear masculine silence. I understand it. I honor it. And through my presence, I transform it. Say it again, not with your mind, but with your soul. I am the woman whose energy becomes unforgettable. I am the woman a man returns to, not because I chase him, but because my presence calls him home. From today forward, you are not the woman who holds on. You are the woman who holds herself. You are not the woman who begs for connection. You are the woman who inspires it effortlessly. You are not the woman who fears the silence. You are the woman who masters it. And that is why no man, no matter how much time passes, no matter who enters his life, will ever truly forget you. If this message awakened something within you, share it with the women who walk beside you. Leave a like, subscribe, and join the Heartsync X community, a space for souls who refuse to love on a superficial level and are ready to rise into conscious intimacy. And remember this truth always. Power is not what you do to hold someone. Power is what you radiate when you no longer need to.